All right, chapter 4. Told you this is going to be a while. Hopefully you're hanging with me. Now I say, as long as the heir is a child, he does not differ at all from a slave, although he is owner of everything. But he is under guardians and managers until the date set by the father. This is kind of what I was talking about earlier with tutors. Same kind of idea. So, also we, while we were children, were held in bondage under the elemental things of the world. So while we were children, before we came to Christ, we were held in bondage. See, the law was bondage. That's what we had before Christ. What does he say, though? The elemental things of the world. Does the world keep the Father's commandments? Does the world esteem his Torah? No. When was the last time you went out in the world and just saw a bunch of people keeping the Sabbath? When was the last time you went out in the world and saw a bunch of people eating clean? Or keeping Passover? Or even wearing tassels? You don't see it in the world. That's what makes it holy. These are the things that Yahweh told his people to do to be wholly set apart to him. The world doesn't do those things. So when he's talking about the elemental things of the world, he is not talking about keeping the Father's commandments. That makes no sense. Now remember, he's talking to a bunch of Gentiles here who were not raised in that environment. They were raised in pagan temples. That's the elemental things of the world. But when the fullness of the time came, Yahweh sent forth his son, born of a woman, born under the law. Oh. But wait a minute. Under the law is bad. But he was born under the law, which would apparently mean that let's keep reading. So that he might redeem those who were under the law, that we might receive the adoption of as sons. Now, slow down here. Let's break this down. This is several years after Calvary. He's talking to Gentiles. He himself practiced Judaism growing up. Still does to some extent. What is he saying here? He's saying that he, meaning the Son, might redeem those who were under the law. Okay? So that's the Jews that were keeping the commandments right. Okay? What about those who were not keeping the law? What about those who were not under the law? Okay, slow down. So when the fullness of time came, Yahweh sent forth his son, born of a woman, born under the law. Why? So that he might redeem those who were under the law. Does it say anything about redeeming those who were not under the law? But James, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. Yeah. Why? That we might receive the adoption as sons. The we. Now, is Paul talking about we as in we Jews? Or is he talking about we as in we, all of us here together, Jew and Gentile? If he's talking about we Jews, then yes, the idea that, the ones who were under the law, that's who he came to redeem. Okay, did he only come to redeem the Jews because they were the only ones under the law? Or is he also talking about potentially you Gentiles who were under the law with me, as he was under the law, and he came to redeem those who were under the law, which is us? I know that's radical, especially what we're going to read later, but it's something to think about. Verse 6, because you are sons, these Gentiles are sons, Yahweh has sent forth the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Therefore, you are no longer a slave, but a son. And if a son, then an heir through God. An heir to what? What's he been talking about? The promise made to Abraham. However, at that time, verse 8, when you did not know God, you were slaves to those which by nature are no gods. You were pagans, you were heathen. But now that you have come to know God, or rather to be known by God, how is it that you turn back again to the weak and worthless elemental things? How many times have people read this to me and said that this is talking about, now that you have Christ and you're turning back to the law? What? He's talking about pagans. These guys used to be pagans. He's talking about them turning back to that. These guys weren't raised keeping the law. So turning back to the law makes no sense for these guys. And that same paradigm holds true for the book of Colossians. But now that you have come to know Yahweh, or rather to be known by Yahweh, how is it that you turn back to the weak and worthless elemental things to which you desire to be enslaved all over again? So these Galatians are apparently having some kind of a struggle here. Part of them wants to kind of go back into their paganism, but yet part of them is they've got these Jews always on them. You gotta be Jewish, you gotta be Jewish. It's who are we? What's our identity here? Are we Gentiles or are we Israel? Or excuse me, let me rephrase that. Are we Gentiles or are we Jews? Paul's trying to say it's bigger than that. You're not Jews. You're sons of Abraham. You observe days and months and seasons and years. Look at you guys. Look at you foolish Galatians wanting to keep Passover. Wanting to keep the Sabbath. Tabernacles. What's he talking about, though? He's talking about going back into their previous pagan ways. Guess what? Pagans have holidays, too. I fear for you that perhaps I've labored over you in vain. Ooh, can you imagine if somebody said that to you? I beg of you, brethren, become as I am. Become as I am. We're going to read about how Paul is in a minute. Because, I'm going to go through Galatians, but I'm not going to stop in Galatians. Excuse me. I just have another thing there. Excuse me. So, become as he is. How is he? How is Paul? Let's keep going. I beg of you, brethren, become as I am, for I also have become as you are. You have done me no wrong. But you know that it was because of a bodily illness that I preached the gospel to you the first time. And that which was a trial to you in my bodily condition, you did not despise or loathe, but you received me as an angel of Yahweh, as Christ Jesus himself. So he was sick. Apparently he got waylaid in Galatia. He didn't want to, but since he was sick there anyway, hey, why not preach the gospel to these guys? Where then is that sense of blessing you had? For I bear you witness that, if possible, you would have plucked out your eyes and given them to me. So have I become your enemy by telling you the truth? Ooh. They eagerly seek you, not commendably, but they wish to shut you out so that you will seek them. Who's they? These Jews. These Jews, the party of the circumcision, want these Gentile believers in Galatia to come to them. That's what he's talking about. This is what he talks about with the enmity in Ephesians. The enmity between the Jews and the Gentiles is the law. That's the dividing point between the Jews and the Gentiles. Because you had Jews telling the Gentiles, not only did they have to keep everything right off the bat, including circumcision, but that a lot of them still clung to these traditions that were added by the elders. They didn't get that memo. That's the enmity. Okay, so, but it is good always, verse 18, to be eagerly sought in a commendable manner, and not only when I am present with you. My children, with whom I am again in labor until Christ is formed in you. But I could wish to be present with you now, and to change my tone, for I am perplexed about you. So, I came on and just went off on Halloween last night. And my tone was not the happiest. It wasn't the prettiest. It wasn't the cheeriest. I was probably a little bit of a Debbie Downer. And that's okay. Because that's a dark topic. You know? People that claim to follow the Messiah just reveling in the Day of the Dead like it's no big deal. I can't imagine something more heartbreaking to talk about. But yet, there it is. So, he doesn't want to have this tone with them. He's wishing he was able to say something happier, but because of their situation, he can't. Now, here we go. If I had a nickel every time this was quoted to me over the years, I don't know how many nickels I would have, but I would have a lot. Okay? Tell me, you who want to be under the law, James, you want to keep those commandments, you want to be under the law, right? Do you not listen to the law? So, Gentiles, people who were born in Asia Minor, who apparently were not raised Jewish, you who want to be under the law, do you not listen to the law? How and why are these Gentile believers in Galatia listening to the law? Why? For it is written that Abraham had two sons, one by the bondwoman and one by the free woman. Why do these Galatians have this information? I mean, he's using the story of Abraham of Sarah and Hagar to teach them a principle, which means he's assuming that they know these stories. If the whole plan is go out and teach the Gentiles John 3:16, that's it. Why do these Gentile believers in Galatia know about Sarah and Hagar? Why do they know what the law says? And notice how he says, do you not listen to the law? And he talks about Sarah and Hagar, which should be something obvious to anyone that's taken a little bit to kind of understand biblical terms. Law, Torah, doesn't just mean the commandments, the do's and don'ts. Historically, it was understood to be the first 5 books of the Bible. Anything written in those first 5 books is considered the law, even if it's not commandments. This is found in that section. So therefore, he's talking about it being in the law, which these Gentile believers somehow knew. Who taught them? But the son of the bondwoman was born according to the flesh, and the son by the free woman through the promise. What's he been talking about through this promise? Up until this point, the promise he's been talking about has been the promise made to Abraham. It's taking us back to Abraham now. This is allegorically speaking. For these women are 2 covenants. Ooh, covenants. One proceeding from Mount Sinai, bearing children who are to be slaves. She is Hagar. What came from Sinai? The law. Therefore, the law is slavery. Hey guys, I'm going to bring you out of Egypt, and get this, I'm going to put you right back under slavery. Now this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia and corresponds to the present Jerusalem, the Jerusalem of Paul's time. For she is in slavery with her children. Now, what has he been talking about this whole time? The whole trigger for this letter, and he referred back to Acts 15 and the Council of Jerusalem. He's talking about what's on his mind, or top of mind, as some people say, is this idea that you have these Jews who want the Gentiles to obey the letter of the law accurately day one, and in some cases want them to obey the extra-biblical Jewish traditions that were added to the law day one. Okay? So, the present-day Jerusalem is Hagar, and she's in slavery. What did the Messiah say? He said, come to me. His what? His yoke is easy, and his burden is light. Which means theirs was not. They were placing burdens on the people. All these extra commandments. Did you know that today in modern Judaism there are over 1,000 commandments just for keeping the Sabbath? Just for keeping the Sabbath. All the Bible says, you're supposed to rest, not work, which basically means don't do your day job. Take a day off, rest. You're supposed to have a holy convocation. And you also have the commandment not to kindle a fire. There's debate on what that means, but that's pretty much it. But you have 1,000 commandments built on that. Orthodox Jews, when they go to synagogue, they will not carry their Bible in their hands because that's carrying a burden. So what do? They have a little pocket sewn into their jacket. They stick their Bible in there. That way they're not using their hands to carry their Bible. Burdens. Slavery. That's where the slavery is. So those children are slaves from Mount Sinai. Who was it that kept referring back to Mount Sinai? Oh, we're following Moses. Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes, right? Now this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia and corresponds to the present Jerusalem, for she is in slavery with her children. Verse 26, but the Jerusalem above is free. She is our mother. For it is written, rejoice, barren woman who does not bear. Break forth and shout, you who are not in labor. For more numerous are the children of the desolate than of the one who has a husband. And you, brethren, like Isaac, are children of the promise. What was promised to Isaac? The same thing that was promised to Abraham, that you and your descendants will possess this land forever. But as at that time he who was born according to the flesh persecuted him who was born according to the Spirit, so it is now also. These Jews were persecuting these Gentiles, but guess what? They weren't only persecuting the Gentiles, they were persecuting other Jews who believed that Yahshua was Messiah, but eschewed keeping all these extra commandments. This was the pressure that Peter and company were under. This is why they were kind of backsliding into, hey, we're just going to hang out with the Jews and not the Gentiles. They were feeling that pressure. Right? They were being persecuted. They were sons of the Spirit, and the sons of slavery, the sons of the flesh, the sons of Hagar, who were slaves to Mount Sinai, which was Jerusalem in the present age. These are people who we are Jews. This is what we do. To this day, if you are caught, and Tobias Singer, I've seen him say this on Facebook or YouTube, and I know he's not the only one. If you are a Christian and you try to convince the Jews of Jesus, what does that mean? Well, Jesus did away with the law, right? Christians don't keep the commandments, not consciously. So when you tell them that they need to abandon Judaism and follow Jesus, he will tell you you are being racist, anti-Semitic. Why does he make that connection? Because they connect their religion with their race. They connect keeping these rabbinical commandments with their ethnicity. They are one and the same. If you take away their religious identity by moving them away from the rabbinic traditions, what you will do, if they follow Jesus, of course, if they follow Jesus, they don't just leave the rabbinic traditions, they leave Moses. You are taking away their racial identity with it. This is how the Jews were at this time as well. They were one and the same. To this day, if you say someone's Jewish, what do you mean? It's assumed that they are of Jewish religion and of Jewish blood. How do you differentiate? If you're talking about Jerry Seinfeld, you say he's a non-practicing Jew, right? So, verse 30. But what does the scripture say? Cast out the bondwoman and her son, for the son of the bondwoman shall not be an heir with the son of the free woman. So then, brethren, we are not children of the bondwoman, but of the free woman. Translation. I know this is radical. If you want to keep the commandments and do the law just because you're Jewish, you are under slavery. You are of Hagar. You are a slave to the flesh. Your flesh is what determines your obedience to the Father. If you choose to obey the Father because you want to, regardless of your flesh, you are of the free woman. You are of Sarah. I know a woman who later in life, I think she was a Methodist or a Lutheran or something most of her life, her and her husband, late in life, found out somehow that she was Jewish. She had Jewish blood somewhere in her family. So all of a sudden, because this woman has Jewish blood and is somehow Jewish, guess what? New Testament's out. Jesus is out. Passover is in. Sabbath is in. Because of her DNA. Slave to the flesh. Hagar. It's that simple.